Hi, today I want to talk about pistol caliber carbines and give some of my opinions on where and if they fit into any of my systems. As anyone that's watching my videos knows, all of my rifles, equipment, etc. are set up for specific scenarios, from my hunting rifles, shotguns, handguns of all different calibers, shapes, and sizes, as well as my AR-15s and things that I would consider SHTF or shit hits the fan or whatever kind of setups. So disclaimer here, I don't proclaim to be a genius, and if you don't agree with my opinions or you have another opinion of your own, please share it in the comments and explain to me why I'm wrong, and I'll take that into account. And I'm constantly learning, right? So with that, so what's my stance been in the past? So my stance has been that pistol caliber carbines don't fit, or pistol caliber rifles don't fit into anything that I actually do, into any of my systems, right? And I haven't had any set up in my system. So one of the reasons, and I've made some notes here as to some of the reasons, right? One of the reasons is why would I want a rifle that barely outperforms my pistol, right? So we've all heard that saying, use your pistol to fight to your rifle or whatever. I've never heard anybody say use your pistol to fight to another pistol, right? So that's one of the reasons. I've always felt like a pistol caliber rifle was not a whole lot better than just having a handgun, and if I needed a rifle, I want a real rifle caliber in a real rifle. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, personally, I'm not in a situation where, unless it's the most extreme circumstance, that me or my family would ever bug out, right? We would never leave home, for the most part, in a without rule of law or shit hits the fan situation because of where we live. We don't live in a super populated area, and all of our stuff is here. Why would we, and if we didn't have to, why would we want to hit the road and leave all of our supplies and things here, friends and family that would be around close to help out, right? So a sense of community, why would we want to leave? So for that reason, I've never thought that the extra weight of either the ammunition, if that's really even true, or the rifle for that matter, would make that much of a difference. Because what are we talking about? A couple of pounds as far as the rifle, maybe a couple of pounds with the optic and everything on it. And as far as the ammunition goes, I'll show this. This is 500 rounds of 62 grain full metal jacket, the green tipped penetrators, right? The M855s. So with this, 1,000 rounds of this weighs 28 pounds, right? And I have 5,000+ rounds of these in boxes around the house. So now this is 1,000 rounds of 9mm. So the size is a little bit smaller, right? But this is a brand new box. The size is a bit smaller, but it's still like 27 pounds. So we're talking a pound difference for 1,000 rounds of ammunition. And if you're not bugging out and leaving your house, that pound doesn't matter. And this has a muzzle velocity of, and I'll use the Midwest, I'll use the Midway USA site. This has a muzzle velocity of 1,280 feet per second and 118 foot-pounds of energy in this 9mm cartridge. That rifle cartridge has a muzzle velocity of 3,060 feet per second and over 1,200 foot-pounds of energy. So we're talking 4 times the energy out of that round versus this 9mm round. So why would I want to have an inferior cartridge if I'm not really even saving that much weight? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So that was one of the reasons. And then another reason that I have is like, if you did have, I don't know what everyone's dream or fantasy of a shit hits the fan or without rule of law situation is. I know some people think that they're gonna be hunting for food and stuff, but I think personally that if that ever happened, that you're not the only one that's gonna be hunting for food, and all the game's gonna be gone before you know it. So that's not really gonna happen. But let's just say that it did. A 9mm round is not a hunting cartridge at any distance. Can it kill a deer or, you know, a rabbit or whatever? Yeah, it can, obviously, right? But again, it's not the right round for that. And since most of our ammunition, and you know, if you're somebody different, that's fine, but most of the ammunition that we stock up on is full metal jackets. It's not even an expanding round, because 1,000 rounds of full metal jacket is $300 and something right now, I think, right? 1,000 rounds of something like Hornady Critical Defense, 124 grain, astronomically more expensive than that, right? Because 25 of those is $30 for 25 rounds. So you do the math, right? Most of us are not stocking up defensive ammunition. If you have 5,000 rounds of defensive ammunition laying around, you've done a good job. I don't, right? But I have thousands and thousands of rounds of full metal jacket 9mm, just like I have thousands and thousands of rounds, 5,000 or 6,000 rounds of that green tip, plus another few thousand rounds of the 55 grain for that matter, right? So anyway, you're not gonna have thousands of rounds of defensive ammunition for your 9mm pistol. So it's not the hunting cartridge that you would think anyway. And then the next thing would be for a truck gun. I've heard truck gun constantly, right? You know, good 9mm pistol caliber carbine or pistol caliber rifle is wonderful for a truck gun because it folds up and it's really small. In my truck, I have an SBR in 5.56. Here's the reason. I've actually been in a situation where it's been kind of touch and go on the road, and a 5.56 will penetrate doors to cars, car glass. If you actually have to get into a gunfight on the side of the road, and I pray that you don't have to, and I'm glad that it turned out that I didn't have to, but a 5.56 is the way to go, because if you have to shoot through glass or shoot through a car door to stop a threat, pistol caliber carbine is not the round that you're going to want to be, especially with defensive ammunition for that matter. If you have it loaded with defensive ammunition by any chance, it's not going through that car door, all right? So not as well as the 5.56 will. So it's also not the perfect truck gun because it's still underpowered. The next thing is AR-15s. I have a handful of AR-15s and a ton of parts for AR-15s. You know, bolt carrier groups, firing pins, just you name it. I've got parts for AR-15s, and I've got, like I said, a handful of AR-15s. Enough that in a real, and they're all interchangeable, right? All AR-15s for the most part are interchangeable. So in a real SHTF without rule of law kind of a situation, I can keep my AR-15s running forever just based on the parts. And if I had to, you know, just taking parts off of other AR-15s that I have. Also, friends and family that have AR-15s, I can keep them running or hand them one of mine and keep that running as well with my parts. Pistol caliber carbines aren't necessarily set up to that interchangeability for actual parts. So you're more likely to have something go down on you and have to replace a part. And if you have to, do you have all the parts do you have all the parts to keep your Kel-Tec sub 2000 running, right? Do you have all those parts to keep that running? Probably not. I mean, I don't, so maybe you do, but probably not. What about your FNs and your CMMGs, right? The actual little sub gun looking things. Do you have parts to keep that running forever? Probably not. AR-15 parts are things that you can accumulate to keep those running for the long haul. So that's another thing, right? And I actually don't think, So I've also heard that PCC recoils less. You can hand it to a younger shooter if you had to. Here's the thing there. I don't think that these recoil that much less than a 5.56 with a 16-inch pin, 14-inch with a 16-inch, pinned barrel. I don't think that the Pistol Caliber carbines recoil that much less, right? So I don't actually. And with the AR-15 adjustability on the stock, right, the adjustability, you can hand an AR-15 to a younger shooter too. So, and then you're right back to, can I keep that rifle running? Yes, I can keep the AR-15 running. No, I can't keep the Banshee running, right? That's not going to happen, for me at least. So those are reasons that I actually just don't think that, some of the reasons at least, that I actually just don't think that a Pistol Caliber carbine has any place in a hunting system, in your truck gun, in your without rule of law or shit hits the fan fantasy, right? Whatever that happens to be for most of us. Now, there are some things that I've been thinking recently, maybe it does fit. And so some of the things that I think that it does fit, right? Inside the home. So as an inside the home defensive weapon, you can have your Glock 19. There's nothing in this, there's nothing in this, right? Okay, so you can have your Glock 19 or your Glock 17, right? This is going to be harder to shoot than, and I'm just going to use this as an example because it's the one I could grab out of the safe the quickest. Your Kel-Tec sub 2000 and 9mm, and this is also the Glock one, right? Takes Gen 5 Glock 17 magazines. This is going to be way more accurate, and if you do have this loaded with self-defense rounds and you have to use this at night in your home, it's less likely to penetrate your wall after it goes through the intruder and into the next room and potentially out the other wall out of your house and down the street. This is less likely to do that. So in your home, for short distance engagements where penetration is important and you want accuracy when your motor skills are probably impaired, right? This is that type of rifle. Your sub kind of guns that you have, other 9mm Pistol Caliber carbines, right? There's a ton of them out there, but this is the one that I happened to grab out of the safe. And let's see, this actually is interchangeable. So this takes Glock Gen 5 magazines, and this is, like I said, this is Gen 5 Glock 17. So that's kind of good because I have a Glock 17 Gen 5. So I have the magazines that it came with, the magazines that the sub 2000 came with, and these are really cheap. So I think these are $20 or $30, right? You can buy a handful of these from the store. And they do work. They also work in your G19, right? Or other Glock that take the same pattern magazine, right? So that is kind of good. So magazine interchangeability, the G19 magazines do not work in this. They're too short, just to show everybody. Right, they don't work in there. So the Glock 17 Gen 5 magazines do. So that is something that I think is kind of good about these rounds. You're not going to have over penetration if you're using a self-defense round, whereas if you fire your 5.56 in the house, it's likely to go down the street and into your neighbor's house, right? So, or your neighbor's car or anything else, right? The other thing is the noise. This is a bit less noisy than 5.56, especially one with like a brake on it or something, or some kind of a muzzle device. So this is a bit less noisy. Although I have to say that in the house, You might want it to be a little quieter so you can communicate with other people on your team in the house, your family, tell your kids where to go, instruct your wife, etc. But I actually want it to be as loud as possible, and I want to scare the shit out of whoever is breaking into my house in the middle of the night. So if the noise from the 5.56 going off were to scare them more, that's okay too. But for safety's sake, this is what I would use, and I would not use a 5.56 in the house if I didn't know where everybody was at, for instance, and I didn't want to go through the walls into another adjacent room. So that is a positive here. And if you actually do leave your home, so some scenario happens, you live in downtown Manhattan and the zombie apocalypse happens and you have to get out of the city, right, to a place like I live where you'll probably be able to see them coming for miles, right? This is easier to fold up. You can't carry a whole lot of stuff. You got to get out of the house. I'd still try to grab my AR-15, to be honest with you. But if you had to, this is lighter. This is easier to grab. You can carry more rounds space-wise of 9mm than you can of 5.56, even if the weight's not a whole lot different. And you don't have to carry a ton of different style magazines because you can just grab, you know, however many you have here, 10 of these things, throw them in a backpack and walk off, right? And know that they work in your handgun and in your carbine. So that is something. But I will say, if you're gonna do that, instead of grabbing this, and this could be up for debate, right? Why not have a 22 Magnum? 22 Magnum handgun, 22 Magnum rifle. Now you're shooting a rifle caliber round. And if you're worried about weight, that's gonna be way lighter, and you can stick 500 rounds of 22 Magnum in your front pocket and walk off with that, right? Whereas you're not gonna stick 500 rounds of 9mm in your front pocket. That's open for debate. I'm curious what people think about that comment. The cost of ammunition is cheaper for 9mm, especially range ammunition or full metal jacket, stuff like that, which is what I've stocked up on for situations like that, and just for fun, right? And burn through 500 rounds of 9mm and not go broke. Whereas if you keep shooting 500 rounds at a time of 5.56, it does become a little more expensive. So cost of ammunition is less for 9mm. Which brings me to my final, and I think where this gun fits for me at least, and that's cheap, light, fun. So walking around at the farm or walking around in the hunting club and just plinking away, this is a ton of fun, right? It's light, I can burn up tons of ammo, carry a ton of it in my pocket, play around switching between my the carbine and a handgun, right? And that's kind of where I think this fits. This is just a heck of a lot of fun to shoot. I mean, plus, if you are shooting steel, can't shoot close up steel with a rifle because it'll damage your target and maybe you when it bounces back, right? You can get closer to a steel target, for instance, with this and just, you know, go to town on it, right? And not necessarily worry about it bouncing back and causing you personal damage or ruining your target. So that's where I think these things fit in. I think these fit in as just a whole lot of fun and a purpose-built rifle for in your house or your apartment. If you live in an apartment and you don't want to shoot through the neighbor's bedroom, right? With the proper ammunition, like the Hornady critical defense that's built to expand and not have a ton of penetration. You know, not the critical duty that's built to penetrate a little bit more, but the actual critical defense rounds, which that's the difference. The critical duty is built to have a little bit more penetration and defeat some hard barriers like auto glass, etc., right? For duty carry, for law enforcement, for instance, right? Where the critical defense is built for you and I to carry in our pocket when we're out and about, knowing that if we did have to use it, hopefully well, for the most part, it probably won't penetrate through whoever's attacking you and hit a innocent bystander, because that's the last thing that any of us would want to do is harm an innocent person, right? So that is my real quick overview of where I think these fit in. And now with that said, I'm going to shoot a video of testing some of these pistol caliber carbines, right? Like this one, and then the Smith & Wesson M&P pistol caliber carbine. The reason I don't have that out here, I don't have a whole lot of Smith & Wesson compatible magazines. So as far as my personal choice goes, based on the magazines and the fact that I have a box full of them, is the Glock compatible PCCs. So if you want to see that range footage and me testing these guns and kind of playing with them on the range, please subscribe to my channel. And if you have a difference of opinion and you think that PCCs are just the best thing and they are shit hit fan worthy, WROL magic, if you think these are hunting guns, please leave that in the comments and kind of explain your thought process, okay? So thank you very much and have a good day.